My name is Dr. John Gunn, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher with New Jersey's Gun Violence Research Center at Rutgers University. The GVRC was founded by Governor Phil Murphy in 2018 and is dedicated to understanding the causes of gun violence, evaluating ways of combating it, and working directly with communities most impacted by it. Using the broad reach of Rutgers University, the center aims to communicate gun violence science in a way that is easily translated into action, because any research done is only as good as its reach to policymakers and the communities who need it. My role at the center focuses on exploring the impact of firearms on suicide. Our latest data for 2019 show that more than 47,000 people died by suicide, and of those, more than half died using a firearm. In fact, suicide deaths account for the majority of our nation's gun deaths. In addition to the loss of lives accounted for by suicide deaths, it is also important to consider how many people in our communities are impacted by a suicide loss. Recent work estimates that for every death by suicide, there are around 135 people who knew the deceased in some way and were impacted by the death. That is over 6.3 million people in the US in 2019 who knew someone who died by suicide. The relationship between firearms and suicide is important. But when we talk about a relationship between firearms and suicide, what we're not saying is that owning a firearm makes an individual suicidal. Rather, we're talking about the fact that having access to a firearm magnifies the likelihood that a suicide attempt will turn deadly. Suicide is very difficult to predict, and so many of our interventions occur only after an individual has a moment of crisis or makes an attempt. But with firearms, this isn't typically possible because they're so lethal that the vast majority of first-time attempts with a firearm result in death. This lethality, combined with the availability of firearms in the US, is why they account for the majority of US suicide deaths. So an important question to ask is, what can we do? Well, there are a number of things we can do to help lower the risk of suicide among firearm owners. And one of the most supported methods is to engage in safe storage practices. Safe storage would be keeping a firearm locked away, keeping it unloaded, and keeping the ammunition stored separately from the firearm. These actions can put time between the decision to make an attempt and the actual attempt itself, time in which an individual can change their mind, time in which they can get help, or time in which others may intervene. Importantly, safe storage is also a prevention method that is more easily translated into cooperation between typically opposing groups. Messaging around safe storage can be communicated to gun owners and doesn't typically face the same barriers that other prevention efforts, such as legislation, involve. Thank you for inviting the New Jersey Gun Violence Research Center to the table today, and thank you all for the work you do. If you are concerned for anyone in your life, please ask them if they are struggling with suicidal thoughts. Asking about suicide does not make someone suicidal. At most, it leads to an awkward conversation, and awkward is a very small price to pay if it saves a life. Thank you.